Me, female 33, and my husband, male 35, have been married for over 2 years. Since day one, his mom, mother-in-law, played favorites and spoiled my sister-in-law rotten. She'd always praise her while neglecting me, always busy sending her gifts and inviting her to events while ignoring me. I didn't mind keeping my distance. I don't hate to be left alone. But one way or the other, the way she treated me still hurts. My sister got most of the attention, especially with her pregnancy and all that. In the past few months, my in-laws have been busy with my brother-in-law's issues with sister-in-law. My mother-in-law tried everything to fix those issues until my brother-in-law told her his soon-to-be ex-wife was being unfaithful and he discovered her affair recently. My husband and I knew nothing about this till his mother came crying and bad-mouthing my sister-in-law, basically shaming her and regretting all the good things she's done for her. Then went on about wanting to make sure brother-in-law's 2 kids are getting DNA tested and see how things go from there. I didn't want to get involved and focused on my son. Things have thankfully calmed down and everyone has calmed down as well. I gave birth to my son 2 weeks ago. Everything was going well. I was only able to see my family and my husband's family when I was discharged and arrived home. Only mom came to visit with my family, while my mother-in-law came with her 2 sisters and her niece as well. First thing she did when she saw the baby was asking everyone whether he has any of his father's features. I felt uncomfortable, but I didn't pay much attention. My mom did all the work and served all the drinks and meals after she helped with cleaning. My mother-in-law took a sip of her coffee, looked at my husband while we were busy with our son, and said, "Well, when are you taking the DNA test?" The room went silent. She paused for a few seconds, then casually said she was just kidding, then put her hands together looking nervous. My husband started laughing, even motioned for me to start laughing. I really didn't get the joke at all. My mom just kept staring at me. I felt absolutely awful. I couldn't wait for the visit to be over. My mother-in-law left without even saying goodbye to her grandbaby. I then asked my husband about what happened, and he said his mom was just joking and she wasn't talking about me and her joke, saying she's still shocked by what she found out about my sister-in-law. I told him it wasn't nice since she basically implied that his son isn't his in front of everyone and offended me like that. He said I overreacted over a joke and that it was nothing really. I'm still thinking about what she said and I feel awful. It might be nothing, but from her tone, she did mean something, and I've been stressing out every time I remember it. That was not a joke, but I suggest your husband get a DNA test to see if his dad is really his dad. Then mother-in-law might understand her fake joke. Jokes are ruined best when they are explained. AKA, so the joke is that I broke my marriage vows and had unprotected intercourse with a man that is not my husband, got pregnant by this other man, and gave birth to the child that I am currently holding in my arms. Your grandchild. Is that a joke? Just wanted to make sure before I tell others about this hilarious joke. Her ego got hurt by making a fool of herself over your sister-in-law, and now she wants to make herself feel better by verbally kicking you and your child. I cannot believe your husband would sit there and let her insinuate that your child is not his. That is just disgusting. I started to save money since high school. My father has a rule to support us till we get our first job after college. I, female 26, was the only one saving. My sister, female 25, didn't bother herself at all. After college, I struggled a lot to find a well-paying job. I was in a low-paying job for 2.5 years, but I didn't stop saving. I got my dream job since 1 year, and recently promoted to be the supervisor. My sister got a well-paying job immediately after college, but she didn't save anything at all. Earlier this year, I got engaged to my long-term boyfriend, male 26. We own a nice apartment together, 3 cars, saved a lot, and started to invest our money. My sister got engaged shortly after me. Her fiancé, male 28, has 0 savings. They don't have a car and can't buy one, not because they can't afford, but they rather spend their money on fancy stuff. 3 years ago, I loaned my sister some money, $10K, and till now, she didn't give me anything, and I was fine with that. Now she's planning her wedding, renewing their apartment, and she also wants to buy a brand new car. She obviously doesn't have enough money for all this. My entire family are trying to pressure me to help her fiancé getting a loan from the bank. Does saying no make me the bad person here? According to them, I should help because I won't need to take a loan anytime in the near future. I am very well paid, so the bank will loan him more money with my help. I don't have a very good relationship with them all, and one of the reasons why I save so much is because I don't want help from anyone in the future. I was always the least favorite kid, and I don't know why. They don't treat my fiancé like a family, and I don't know why. What your family is asking you to do here is co-sign loans for your family because you're the most financially solvent person in the family. Make no mistake, this will make you financially liable if they default on the loans, which means they, the bank, will take your money and your property. Your family treats you poorly, does not repay loans, and wants you to assume someone else's financial liabilities. They have no savings of their own despite a good income because of spending habits. They borrowed $10,000 from you and never paid it back. Do you really think they're reliable to pay money that the bank is going to loan them? I'll tell you what will happen. They will pay for a while, then stop, then default on the loans, and you will lose everything you have worked for. Say no. Update. Some suggested to tell my family about the $10,000. They already know about it and tried to make me feel guilty for loaning her money because I should give it to her. She spent the money on some fancy bags. My sister brought up the subject again. She started with, "My mom thinks we should loan our brother some money for his car, and you know my situation. I'm about to get married and don't own a car." Hello, I'm about to get married also. Why no one seems to care? And I don't know why they buy cars they can't afford. Clearly, they will continue taking advantage of me unless I set my boundaries. I told her that I'm still waiting on my $10,000, and there's no way I'm going to help anyone getting any loan or giving anyone any money. I've always been the least favorite kid. I tried to figure out the reasons, but I don't know why. I tried so hard to be better in their eyes. I loaned my siblings money, bought them all gifts in every occasion, but still the least favorite. So why should I bother myself with their opinion of me? While my husband and I, both late 20s, were working overseas, away for most of a year, my brother-in-law, late 30s, asked to borrow $600 for tuition. After talking with my husband about it, and with his assurance I could trust my brother-in-law, I sent my bank card with access to my account containing $2.7 thousand via mail with a note saying to contact me directly for the PIN code. Well, a few weeks passed and I didn't hear back from him, so I called and asked about it. Brother-in-law told me he guessed the code and everything is great. He was able to pay his tuition payment and will pay me back as soon as possible. When we got back to Canada, I got my bank card back and it was drained. Of course, I got an itemized list. Lots of small purchases for fast food and even fast food purchases before paying the tuition. He said he had to test the card at the fast food place first. There was one time he put $300 in the account, but he quickly spent that again, as well as another time he added $100, and that was also spent. My bank literally had less than $100 when I saw it. When I confronted him, he was super mad at me. He went over the list and only found $2.3 thousand of purchases. He refuses to go over the statements again and insists it's $2.3 thousand. He and his wife are acting like I'm the one that stole money from them. My husband wants to smooth things over by accepting a case of beer and $50 since we made a lot of money overseas and they are always broke and right now struggling with school. I agree we aren't tight for the money, but the animosity and entitlement from my in-laws are driving me mad. Looking for advice on what to do. Thanks. Your husband wants you to forgive someone who isn't even sorry? Your brother-in-law is a grown man who stole from you. I'm baffled that your hub wants to pretend it never happened. Because it's your hub's brother, I'd follow your husband's lead. But you all know that your brother-in-law is an untrustworthy piece of crap who should never have the keys to your house. He stole from you before he asked to use the card. He's a thief. Tighten up all your financial security. My grandpa was a successful man, and in his mid-60s, he decided he wanted to take a step back, so he started selling off his businesses. He sold his various businesses and spent the next few years traveling. As he approached 70, he got bored in addition to a few new grandchildren, so he needed a bigger house. He sold the old home that he had bought after he got back from Vietnam and bought this massive house on this large piece of land. This property also came with a massive steel barn. Not sure if he ever had told anyone about his plans, but right after he got the property, he dumped a ton of money into tools and equipment and converted his barn into a mechanic's dream. Some things I remember having. He had a professional lift, capable of lifting full-size trucks. He had those professional oil catchers you see at Quick Lubes. He had a dedicated air compressor system that was designed to power all his power tools. He had a tire machine to mount new tires. He had so much equipment. His tool corner was a massive corner of this massive barn. His plan? To fix cars, especially for people in need. He lived in a rural community. If you didn't have a car, that was a big problem. So he let everyone know at his local church that he was willing to work on their cars if they provided the parts. He only took a few jobs a week. He was doing this to enjoy himself and to help those that needed it. He'd of course change oil, change the transmission fluid, and all kinds of various repairs. My grandpa was a talented mechanic. However, he kept the amount of work limited. He was also selective. If you were in need, he'd want to fix your cars. If you had the means to pay, he'd decline and ask you to go elsewhere. One day, the owner of the local car dealership came by and told my grandpa he needed to stop fixing other people's cars because he wasn't properly licensed, didn't have the proper insurances, and was hurting his business. My grandpa explained this is just his hobby. He only does a few cars a week. The owner told him he needs to cut it out or he's going to sue my grandpa out of business. My grandpa said he laughed over this. What business was this guy going to sue him out of? The owner walked out. A little while later, my grandpa got served. He was being sued by the owner of the car dealership. My grandpa thought he'd have a trip down to the dealership and try to reason with the man. My grandpa hoped he could come to an understanding. My grandpa spoke to the owner and basically explained. He only works on people's cars who are down on their luck. The fact is, the people's cars he fixes probably couldn't afford to pay a professional dealership to fix their vehicle. He only does a few cars a week. He's not all that interested in getting into a fight over his hobby, but he ain't going to back down. Well, they ended up in court. By this point, my grandpa had hired a lawyer who was able to get the city to approve a commercial garage on his property. It helped that he lived on the outskirts of town and had 6 acres of property. The court told my grandpa his auto repair shop is operating illegally. If my grandpa wants to continue, he's going to need to get a business license, get the proper insurances, and if he does that, he will be good to go. Now, what do you think a man who has nothing but time and money in this situation is going to do? He's going to get his business license and insurances, of course. Which he did, and that surprised no one. But he went further. Got a dedicated phone line ran into his shop, hired a full-time mechanic, put up a professional sign, set up a little waiting area with a water cooler. What shocked everyone even more, he ran a local TV ad saying he was a pay-what-you-can mechanic shop, reservations only. Put ads in the local paper saying the same thing. Yes, folks, that's right. My grandpa is not only a licensed legal auto repair business, he has a certified mechanic on his payroll, and he's running ads. As for his prices, they were quite simple. You either bring the parts yourself and pay the mechanic whatever you wanted. Mechanic got a separate wage from my grandpa, so if you couldn't pay anything, that was fine. Had my grandpa sourced the parts, he'd charge you for parts and you'd pay the mechanic whatever you want. My grandpa started taking jobs, and boy did that shop get busy. It was impossible to beat Grandpa's price. Grandpa was essentially paying to fix your car for you. My grandpa would spend his days with the mechanic that he had hired working on cars. He loved it. The owner of the local car dealership was furious. He sued my grandpa again. They went to court and the judge basically said my grandpa owned a licensed insured auto repair business. What he charges his customers for his service is completely up to him, even if that means doing the work for free. About a year or so later, my grandpa gets a call from a lawyer who says he's representing a potential buyer of the local car dealership. However, the buyer wants to speak to my grandpa. My grandpa agreed. He sat down with a new potential buyer who expressed his concerns about buying the dealership. Service is a major profit center for a dealership, and he's considering buying the local dealership. However, he doesn't want to buy the dealership if my grandpa is going to keep operating the way he is. Cause it's impossible for a for-profit business to compete against someone selling their services for free. My grandpa agrees that there's no way someone looking to make a profitable business could ever compete against him. So they came to an agreement. The owner buys the dealership, and my grandpa would only work on a few cars a week, maybe 5 or 6. Only work on people's cars who are down on their luck and probably too poor to be able to pay a professional dealership to fix their car. Any parts he needs, he will buy from the dealership. Any work he declined, he'd refer to the dealership. The new owner of the dealership agreed to. Dealership must agree to let my grandpa be. Stay out of his way. Dealership must hire his mechanic. They shook hands. The local dealership was bought out, and for the next 9 years, my grandpa would fix people's cars who were down on their luck. If he had to buy parts, he'd buy them from the dealership. And as for the mechanic my grandpa hired, he ended up becoming the service manager and did quite well for himself. As for my grandpa, when he was 80, he had a heart attack in his shop. Luckily, one of his grandkids was there and they got him to the hospital and he made a full recovery. But the doctor told him his body couldn't handle working in that garage anymore. He ended up shutting down after that. For the next 3 years, he looked out his kitchen window staring at his shop, remembering all the fun he had in his garage. He passed away at 83, surrounded by friends and family. I like that when people have FU money, they use it for good unselfish deeds.